You open the door, and the world greets you with a hush. The air is cool, not cold, and it carries with it a faint heaviness, as though the sky has been holding its breath. You take your first step onto the path outside, and your lungs notice it before your mind does. The breath you draw in feels thicker somehow, almost textured. There's a hint of dampness, like the edge of a cloud drifting low enough for you to touch. This is water vapor, tiny, invisible molecules suspended in the air, each one part of an ancient cycle. The same vapor may have been drawn from an ocean days ago, from the surface of a lake a century ago, or from melting ice thousands of years past. Now, in this moment, it's here, folding itself into your lungs. You breathe in again, slower this time, as though the air itself has something to say. Your body notices more than your mind can immediately name. Your nostrils catch the faint scent of petrichor, that earthy, comforting smell that comes before rain. It's created when plant oils and a soil compound called geosmin rise into the air after being released by the first stirrings of moisture. Your brain has learned to read this as a signal. Change is coming. Even before a single raindrop falls, your skin feels it. Nerve endings just beneath the surface detect tiny shifts in air temperature and humidity. Your skin's surface, covered with microscopic hairs, is exquisitely tuned to subtle movements of air. The breeze tonight is barely there, yet it brushes past you with intention, carrying messages from clouds you cannot yet see. Above you, the sky is a deepening gray, not the heavy darkness of night, but a muted, velvety tone. Somewhere in those clouds, water droplets are gathering, colliding, and growing heavy enough to fall. You imagine them suspended for now, waiting for gravity's pull to outweigh the upward currents of the air. The coolness you feel is more than temperature. It's a language, a conversation between your environment and your nervous system. Thermoreceptors in your skin send signals through thin, quick nerve fibers to your brainstem, where the body's internal thermostat resides. Without a single word spoken, your body is already adjusting tiny muscles in your skin to contract, raising goosebumps as a way to preserve heat. Your breathing may slow, not out of fatigue, but out of a deeper readiness, as though preparing for the rhythm rain will bring. You take another step forward. The path beneath you is familiar, yet feels different tonight. The ground is still dry, but you can almost feel the weight of moisture pressing from above. Somewhere far away, perhaps miles, perhaps just over the next hill, raindrops have already begun their descent. Each inhalation draws in not just oxygen but information. A whisper of wind direction, a trace of pollen, the subtle signature of the Earth's shifting mood. Your olfactory bulb, the small structure just above your nasal cavity, sends these scents directly to the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain. This is why the smell of rain can stir feelings so deep they bypass conscious thought. You aren't just sensing the weather, you're feeling it in a way that is ancient and instinctive. The heaviness in the air is humidity water vapor nearing the point of condensation. At around 100% relative humidity, the air can hold no more, and the surplus falls as rain. But tonight, you are in the moments just before the pause, the breath the earth takes before releasing. These moments are rare in their stillness, for they exist in the space between one state and another. You remember learning once that air density changes before rain. Warm, humid air is lighter, while cooler, rain-heavy air presses down slightly. This shift is almost imperceptible, yet your inner ear's balance system may sense it, and your mood may subtly respond. That calm you feel now, that quiet slowing of thoughts, is not imagined. It's part biology, part environment, part the poetry of a body and world in harmony. Somewhere nearby, a leaf trembles. The sound is barely there, yet it holds your attention. You wonder if plants can feel the coming rain. Science tells us that they can in their own way. Leaves absorb moisture directly from the air, and their stomata, the tiny pores on their surfaces, may open wider in anticipation of a drink. Your footsteps are unhurried, each one a punctuation mark in this sentence of a walk. You begin to notice how your breath and steps match: a slow in-breath with one step, a gentle out-breath with the next. Your mind begins to ease into this rhythm, finding comfort in repetition. The science of this is simple. Matching breath to movement can calm the autonomic nervous system, lowering heart rate and easing tension. It's the body's quiet way of telling you you are safe. Above, the first low rumble of thunder rolls, not loud but deep, like the sound of a stone settling into a riverbed. Thunder is not the voice of the storm itself, but the result of lightning heating air so rapidly it expands in a shockwave. You know the rain is near when thunder feels like it comes from the ground instead of the sky. The cool breath you first noticed now feels cooler still. You realize the journey you've taken just by breathing, a journey into weather, into memory, into the subtle conversation between body and world. The air is no longer something you pass through. It is something you inhabit. You pause. The wind shifts slightly, and for a moment, the scent of rain grows stronger, as if the clouds above have leaned closer to whisper their secret. You close your eyes and breathe in deeply, holding the air just long enough to feel its edges, then letting it go. Your mind drifts toward a thought. Perhaps each breath is a way of touching the weather, of becoming part of the same cycle that moves rivers and forms clouds. Perhaps you are not walking through the air, but with it a companion on its way to something inevitable. And yet, just as you feel this closeness, a question stirs quietly at the edge of your awareness. If the first cool breath holds so much temperature, scent, texture, meaning what will the first drop of rain hold? The sky above seems ready to answer. You tilt your head back, and the world above you feels heavier. The clouds hang low, their edges blurred into the gray of the evening. They are not just scenery, they are vast reservoirs, each holding more water than you could drink in a lifetime. And yet, up there, it is not water in the way you know it. It is vapor, invisible, uncountable, and patient. The air is a quiet storyteller. Every breath you take contains molecules that once drifted over oceans, crossed mountains, and curled through valleys. Some of these molecules have been inside glaciers, others have been locked in leaves, and some might have fallen as snow centuries ago. Now they hover above you, in a balance so delicate it feels like the sky is holding its breath. You walk slowly, feeling the faint rise and fall of wind against your cheeks. The science begins here in condensation. Warm air can hold more moisture than cold air. As the day cools toward night, the air can no longer carry all the invisible water it gathered during the warmth. The excess begins to cling to the smallest of things. Specks of dust, salt from ocean spray, tiny bits of pollen. Each particle becomes a seed for a droplet. It is strange to think that without dust, without imperfection, there might be no rain at all. The purity of water requires the imperfection of air to begin its journey back to earth. You imagine each droplet beginning a film of moisture wrapping itself around a fragment of ash or a microscopic grain from the Sahara, blown thousands of miles from where it was born. Above you, millions of these tiny beginnings gather together. At first, they were too light to fall. They float in swirling patterns, lifted and carried by updrafts of air, gathering in crowds so thick they block the sun. The light that does break through is softened, like looking through frosted glass. Your footsteps echo on the damp pavement, and you notice the air feels thicker now. It is not your imagination. Moist air is heavier in sensation, though lighter in weight, the paradox of perception. Your skin feels the closeness of water that is still invisible to your eyes. It is as though the sky is leaning closer to speak to you. You think of the journey each droplet has taken to be here. Evaporation from a river earlier this week. Steam rising from wet soil after a warm afternoon. A leaf releasing water through invisible pores as the light faded. The sky is a collector, pulling together the stories of thousands of small moments from Earth's surface. Somewhere above you, the temperature drops just enough for more vapor to shift into liquid form. This is the tipping point when the weight of the water exceeds the lifting force of the air currents. The clouds grow darker, not because they are angrier, but because they are denser. Light cannot pass as easily through their crowded droplets. You pause beneath a lamppost, watching the glow halo through the air. Tiny, invisible mist swirls in the light beam. You cannot yet feel rain, but it is already beginning in the space between what your senses can detect and what they will soon confirm. Your mind drifts to the way humans sense weather. Your joints might ache when the air pressure drops. Your skin might tingle when humidity climbs. The hairs on your arms might rise when electrical changes build in the clouds. Long before you consciously notice the rain, your body has been listening. The first droplet touches your skin, a cold pinpoint against the warmth of your face. It is not heavy, not yet part of the steady rhythm that will soon follow. It is a scout sent ahead of the main arrival. One becomes two, then three, scattered and irregular. Your eyes trace them as they slide down your jacket, darkening the fabric in small islands. Somewhere deep inside the cloud, collisions happen. Droplets merge into larger ones, and their weight begins to pull them down faster than the air can push them up. When they fall, they accelerate, each droplet gaining speed until air resistance balances gravity's pull. The sound they make when they meet the ground depends on their size, the surface they strike, and the air through which they travel. Now the rain finds its rhythm, a gentle tapping on leaves, a soft hiss on the road, a steady drumming on the hood of your jacket. The cloud above you is no longer holding back. Its weight is being released, drop by drop, in a slow cascade that feels like the sky exhaling. You breathe in deeply, tasting the petrichor, that earthy scent released when rain meets dry ground. It is a perfume made from plant oils and a compound called geosmin, produced by soil-dwelling bacteria. Your brain recognizes it instantly, perhaps because in deep evolutionary memory, the smell of rain meant water for survival. Your pace slows further, until walking feels less like travel and more like being part of the weather itself. The world is muted now, sounds softened, colors deepened. Rain has a way of gathering everything into itself, folding sharp edges into curves. Your shoulders drop, your breathing eases. You know that somewhere above, the cycle is still at work. Even as these drops fall, more are forming. The weight of clouds is a shifting thing, never constant, always in the act of becoming. You realize that you, too, carry invisible weights until you are ready to let them fall. And perhaps, like the clouds, you need the right conditions to release them. A car passes slowly, its tires sending small fans of water outward. You hear the rain against its roof blend with the softer sounds of drizzle around you. Your eyes follow the red glow of its taillights until they fade into the mist. Somewhere ahead, the street curves toward a grove of trees. The leaves will change the sound of the rain, turning the steady hiss into 100 tiny taps. You wonder how the rhythm will shift, how the droplets will break apart or gather again. And it is there, in the shelter of those branches, that the next part of your walk will begin. The road you walk is lined with trees that seem to be holding their breath. The leaves, once restless in the breeze, now hang still, edges trembling with the smallest movements. It is not silence, you feel it is waiting. Waiting in the air, in the ground, even in your own body. Above, the clouds move as if in slow thought. They are not just gray, but layered light grays stacked over deep, near-blue shadows, with edges frayed into wisps. Each cloud is a living archive, holding droplets too small to see, suspended by the rise of warm air beneath them. They are, in a way, both ocean and mountain water gathered high, shaped by invisible winds, resting until gravity decides to call them home. You breathe in, and the air feels heavier than before. That heaviness is real. When humidity rises, when the air is thick with moisture, it changes how each breath moves through your body. The molecules of water vapor are light, yet they carry heat, holding it close to your skin, wrapping you in something you cannot see but can certainly feel. Your body knows before your mind does. Something is coming. Long ago, sailors read the sky like a book. They would speak of a lowering, the way clouds seemed to sink toward the horizon, pressing closer to the earth. You see it now. The horizon feels nearer, the dome of the sky not quite as high. The weight is not in your imagination. Clouds can hold millions of liters of water, their mass stretching across miles, their shadow changing the color of the land beneath them. There is a science to the stillness you feel. As a storm nears, the warm air rises less quickly. Wind slows at the surface, replaced by the smooth, steady currents higher up. In this quiet, your ears notice smaller sounds. The creak of a branch, the faint shifting of a bird in its nest, the almost imperceptible patter of the first, scattered drops falling somewhere far away. You pause under a canopy of leaves. Through the gaps, the light has changed to less gold, more silver gray. This light scatters differently, filtered through billions of droplets still suspended in the clouds above. It softens edges, mutes colors, makes the world feel closer and more contained. You could be standing in a room made of air. In this dimmer light, you notice your breathing slowing. Your body, without conscious effort, adjusts to the calm pressure of the sky. Your heart beats just a little more steadily. Your thoughts lose their sharp corners. The weight of the sky is not a burden. It is an invitation to let go. You think of how the rain you are about to feel has been here before. The water above you once fell into rivers, or gathered in lakes, or settled deep into the soil before rising again as mist. The sky is a patient archivist, cycling each drop from ocean to cloud to ground, over and over, through centuries. Perhaps the drop that will land on your hand tonight once touched the surface of a faraway shore, or froze into a snowflake on a mountain you've never seen. The air grows even thicker now, the first sense of rain reaching you. Petrichor, the earthy perfume released when dry soil meets water, is still hiding, but other scents arrive first. Green leaves, wet bark, the faint sweetness of distant flowers closing for the night. Your senses drink them in, each one carrying a quiet memory you didn't know you kept. You look up again. The clouds have shifted shape, their edges drawn tighter, the bottoms darker and heavier. It feels almost as if they are leaning toward you, listening. A low rumble rolls across the sky, not sharp, not urgent, but a reminder that above you, energy is gathering. The sound travels through the air, through the ground, into your feet. It is a sound that belongs to every age older than words, older than roads, older even than the trees that surround you. Your footsteps slow. Somewhere deep in your mind, the same part that once told your distant ancestors to take shelter now tells you to linger. You are safe here in this in-between moment, between dryness and rain, between day and night, between thought and sleep. The clouds are not just a ceiling. They are a cradle, lowering themselves until the world feels small enough to rest inside. A single drop lands on your wrist, cool, round, gone in an instant. It is the first signal, the first page of what will soon be a long, steady story written in water. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the anticipation settle into something softer. The next chapter of the night will not be about weight at all. It will be about the sound the sky makes when it finally decides to let go. It begins so quietly that you almost miss it. A soft tick against a leaf somewhere above you. Then another slightly lower pitch, as if the forest were tuning an invisible instrument. A pause, and then a handful more, scattered, like fingers brushing over the strings of a harp. Raindrops are never identical. Some fall fast, cutting a sharp note into the surface they touch. Others drift, slowed by the air, landing with a softer, rounder sound. The shape of each drop is nearly perfect, a sphere molded by surface tension, until the wind tilts it, or it brushes against a branch, changing its fall. By the time it reaches you, each drop has lived its own short story. You tilt your head upward, eyes half closed, letting the first drops land on your face. The coolness is startling, but not unpleasant. It carries a memory you can't quite name, a moment from childhood. Perhaps, when you stood under an awning watching the world dissolve into rain. The human brain is built for this kind of connection. Water falling from the sky has been part of your species' life since the beginning, marking the seasons, filling the rivers, soaking the soil for the food you would eat. It is no wonder your body feels calmer in its presence. The air changes quickly now. That faint green scent becomes something richer, deeper, the smell of earth welcoming the touch of rain after its long wait. Scientists call it petrichor, a mixture of plant oils and a compound named geosmin, released when raindrops disturb the ground. Your nose reads it as a signal. The sky and earth are speaking again. It is a scent that can make even the most restless mind slow its pace. The sound of the rain begins to find its rhythm. At first, it scattered a handful of notes dropped into silence. Then, like a drumline falling into step, the drops begin to sink, finding a pace that feels almost alive. Your brain recognizes this too. The steady, irregular yet predictable pattern of rainfall is a kind of natural white noise. It masks the sharp edges of other sounds, smoothing the acoustic world into something gentle enough to fall asleep inside. You listen closely. It is not one sound, but many layered together, the higher notes of drops on leaves, the softer, hollow taps of drops on soil, the muted thud of water hitting moss. In the distance, the patter deepens where the rain meets the broad metal roof of a barn. It is a soft orchestra, each surface an instrument, each dropping a player with perfect timing. You step forward and let your hand graze the rough bark of a tree. The rain collects in small channels in the grooves, running down to meet your fingertips. Your skin feels the difference instantly. Rainwater, cooler than your body, sends a light shiver along your arm. Your body's nerves translate that into sensation, your mind into a kind of quiet awareness. You are here. You are safe. The ground beneath you softens. Tiny dark spots bloom across the dust, then join, then spread into an even shade. Puddles begin to form, their surfaces dancing with tiny crowns that rise and fall with each drop. Each crown exists for less than a second, a moment of beauty gone before you can blink. Yet they form again and again without end. In this repetition, there is comfort. In this impermanence, there is peace. The forest begins to respond. Somewhere, a bird gives a short, low call, a sound meant for its own kind, letting them. I know it has found shelter. The leaves above you bend under the weight of the water, then flick it away with a sudden shake, sending a shower of fine droplets down over your shoulders. Your hair grows damp, your clothing heavier, but the coolness seeps into you in the best possible way. You realize the rain is not only falling on you, it is falling into you. Not in the literal sense, but in the way sound and sensation can seep into your thoughts. Your inner rhythm begins to match the outer one. Your breathing slows to follow the tempo of the drops. Your muscles loosen without you asking them to. Somewhere deep in your brain, the parasympathetic nervous system, the part that governs rest and restoration, takes over. The rain has activated it without you needing to do anything. Your heart rate eases. Your digestion quietly improves. Your blood pressure shifts downward as if the storm itself is lowering it. It is not magic. It is biology shaped by thousands of years of life lived under falling water. The drops fall thicker now, less space between each sound. They form a blanket not over your body, but over your awareness. The outside world begins to fade, replaced by the sound and smell and feel of this one moment. You are no longer counting time in minutes or hours, but in the distance between raindrops. As you stand there, you notice something beautiful. The spaces between the sounds are just as calming as the sounds themselves. The pause between drops gives your mind a place to rest, just long enough to be ready for the next soft impact. It is a rhythm that feels like breathing, and then, almost without realizing it, you begin to walk again. The path ahead glistens now, small streams forming at the edges, carrying tiny leaves and petals downstream. They look like miniature boats, each one on its own journey. The sky's story is no longer about waiting. It is about movement, release, and quiet surrender. And soon, this rain will meet something else entirely: the still, open water of a lake waiting just ahead. When that happens, the sound will change again, and your body will change with it. The sound begins softly, as though the air itself is clearing its throat before speaking. A single drop lands above you on the roof with a sound so small you might almost miss it. Then another follows, and another, until, in moments, the ceiling becomes a drum and the sky its unseen percussionist. You lie there listening, and it's hard to tell where one drop ends and the next begins. Each sound seems to ripple into the next, like overlapping rings in a pond. It feels infinite, but there is an order hidden in it, a language of rhythm that rain has been speaking for billions of years. When a raindrop falls, it begins its journey high above, in the cool, layered air where clouds form. Water vapor gathers, clinging to microscopic dust particles, pollen, or salt from the sea. These invisible seed aerosols give shape to the droplet, and then gravity takes over, pulling it down toward you. The fall is not smooth. Air pushes back, swirling, making the droplet quiver and change shape as it tumbles. By the time it meets the roof, it is not the perfect sphere you imagine, but a trembling oval, ready to burst. The moment it hits, a tiny explosion of sound and motion occurs. A miniature cymbal crash that your ears translate into a single, satisfying plink. The pitch of that plink depends on so many hidden details. The droplet's size, the angle of its fall, the surface it meets. A small droplet might create a high, sharp note. A heavy one, swollen with its journey, lands with a deeper, rounder tone. Multiply this by thousands of drops falling together, and you get the living, shifting music above you now. Your brain has an ancient love for this kind of sound. Studies show that the human mind finds non-threatening, repetitive noise deeply calming. Unlike alarms or sudden bangs, rain carries no message of danger, it simply is. Its patterns are complex enough to hold your attention, but soft enough to let your mind wander. You breathe slowly. The roof seems to hum with life. You imagine the vibrations traveling through the wood, through the air, into your body. Your heartbeat joins in, a steady bass line beneath the higher notes of the rain. Somewhere in the pattern, you start to hear memories. Not in words, but in the feeling certain rhythms bring. The slow patter reminds you of afternoons in childhood, pressed to the window while the world outside blurred into silver. The heavier thumps sound like camping trips, where you lay in a tent listening to rain tap against the fabric while the earth beneath you cooled. Your mind is wired to make these connections. The hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain, works quietly in moments like this, pairing sound and sensation, rain and memory. It doesn't ask for effort. It simply lets the sound unlock little doors inside you, one by one. And so the storm becomes both present and past, A single drop lands at this moment. Its echo carries you years away. The tempo changes. Wind moves through the trees outside, urging the clouds to shift, making the drops fall at new angles. You hear a rush of hundreds landing at once, then a pause, then a new rhythm beginning. It is music without a score, a performance without rehearsal, and you are its only audience. You think about how each drop carries not just water, but history. The molecules above you have been part of rivers, glaciers, ocean waves. They have drifted inside clouds for days, or cycled through a leaf before evaporating back into the air. Now they arrive here on this roof tonight just for you to hear them. Science calls this the water cycle of evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. But tonight it feels less like a cycle and more like a heartbeat of the earth itself. A pulse, repeated over centuries, connecting oceans and mountaintops, storms and still ponds. The roof's song shifts again, lighter now, more scattered. Your breathing follows. In this quiet interval, you find space between the notes. A silence that is not empty, but full like the stillness in a conversation between old friends. It is here, in the spaces, that your mind begins to float. You think about the patterns of rain, how they never repeat exactly, yet always feel familiar. You wonder if your thoughts are never quite the same twice, yet carrying a tone you've always known. A louder gust returns, rattling the rhythm into something more insistent. You let it wash over you, not resisting, only listening. There is no rush, no place to go. Only this music, this roof, this night. Above you, the drops continue their patient descent. Some are born from distant oceans, others from lakes not far from here. Each one takes its turn in the performance. Each one offers a tiny, perfect note before vanishing into the roof's dark shingles. Somewhere between the next drop and the next, your thoughts dissolve. You stop measuring time by minutes and begin measuring it in patterns of sound. Your body grows heavy, your mind light, and then you notice something else beneath the percussion of the rain. There is a softer sound, a trickle, a flow. Somewhere nearby, water is leaving the roof, finding its path into the ground. You wonder where it will go, and the question feels like the beginning of another journey entirely. It is nearly silent now. The downpour that once wrapped you in its rushing chorus has thinned into a gentle conversation. The occasional drop from the lip of a roof, the last drips from leaves that have already surrendered their water. Each sound is spaced, deliberate, almost ceremonial. You pause beneath a street lamp and watch one droplet hang from the underside of a branch. It grows heavier in slow motion, gathering more of itself until it can no longer resist the pull of gravity. Then a tiny release, a barely audible tap into the small puddle below. Your body responds in ways you do not consciously decide. Your heart rate slows, your muscles loosen. In science, this is called parasympathetic activation, the branch of your nervous system that brings you into rest and recovery. You might think of it as a quiet tide flowing through your veins, replacing alertness with repair. The cool air moves across your face, carrying faint traces of petrichor, that earthy scent born when rain touches dry soil. Scientists trace it to a compound called geosmin, produced by microorganisms in the ground. To some, it smells like nostalgia. To others, it's a signal of renewal. For you, it is a memory you cannot fully name, about childhood, about warm kitchens and windows fogged with steam, about being inside and outside at once. You walk slower now. Each step is a choice. The world feels tuned to a lower frequency. You could almost believe that sound itself has been dampened, a phenomenon physicists might explain in terms of acoustic absorption by water droplets in the air. But here, it feels less like science and more like grace. As you turn a corner, a soft wind stirs the trees. A few late leaves release themselves from high branches, spiraling in quiet arcs toward the wet pavement. The rain has polished each one, their veins holding onto tiny beads of water. You imagine how each bead acts like a small lens, bending light, magnifying a detail, turning the ordinary into the intricate. Your breath moves in and out in steady, rounded waves. This, too, is its own quiet system: oxygen moving from lungs into blood, carbon dioxide traveling back, exchanged without effort. The rhythm is ancient, older than thought. You are simply participating in the great cycle that every living thing knows. And still, the rain lingers, not as a storm now, but as a memory in motion. The gutters carry away the last small streams. The air is saturated but calm. Somewhere, deep in the soil, that water will begin its long journey downward, joining the unseen reservoirs, perhaps not returning for years. You realize you are part of that same cycle, each drop and breath connecting you to something vast. You stop by a small bridge and lean over the railing. Beneath, the narrow creek swells slightly from the day's rain, its surface dimpled by the few drops still falling. You watch one leaf yellow, torn at the edge, float into view. It spins gently, caught between surface tension and the current's pull. Then, without fanfare, it drifts onward, disappearing into the shadow under the bridge. The sight reminds you of how thoughts move in the mind. Each one appears, shaped by its own edges and colors, caught for a moment, then carried away by the deeper flow beneath. Meditation teachers sometimes compare it to watching leaves float on a stream. Neuroscientists might describe it as the default mode network, the brain's quiet, wandering state. But here, standing over the water, you feel it simply as letting go. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the sun is preparing to rise in another part of the world. You picture light traveling across oceans, striking the tops of clouds, slipping between rain curtains to touch the earth again. This, too, is a cycle without hurry, each part fitting into a balance you can feel but never fully hold in your mind. Your shoes make a soft sound on the damp path as you begin to walk again. The houses are fewer here, the air richer with the scent of wet grass. A lone bird calls, not the hurried trill of daytime, but a slow, questioning note, as if testing the air. You think of how rain changes the soundscape for every creature, how the drop in temperature and light cues animals into different rhythms, just as it does for you. A car passes in the distance, its tires hissing on wet asphalt, then fades away. The silence that follows is so complete you can almost hear the space between sounds. This is not emptiness, but fullness, the way a forest after rain feels saturated with life, even in stillness. You turn into your street. The familiar shapes of trees and fences stand softened in the damp light. The rain's last whispers are fading now, each one leaving a small, private echo in your mind. You reach your gate and pause, placing your hand on the cool metal, feeling the slight condensation left by the air. Inside, the rooms are dim and warm. The quiet here is different, shaped by walls, furniture, the hum of distant appliances. Yet the memory of the rain stays with you, woven into your breath, your heartbeat, the way your body has shifted into rest. You sit near the window, watching the final drops trace slow paths down the glass. Outside, the street is empty. The puddles hold their reflections without ripple. Somewhere, the cycle has already begun again. Water rising unseen, clouds forming, the weight of rain gathering in the sky. And you wonder, in a drowsy, unhurried way, what the next evening will bring. The thought drifts with you, softer, quieter, until it is no longer a thought but a presence. The sense that everything you have walked through tonight will return, not as repetition, but as part of the endless, breathing rhythm of the earth. And as your eyes begin to close, you feel the first threads of that rhythm carry you inward, toward a place where even the last whisper of rain dissolves into the stillness of dreams.
you.